Good afternoon, gentlemen. Welcome to today's afternoon session class. So the high voltage, we have finished till high voltage circuit breakers. And the next topic will be high voltage cable and fuses, etc. So before we go to the next topic, we will discuss few of the questions which was asked in the last class, okay, the previous classes. Also, we will do a recap of all the topics what has been covered. So in the last class, we have discussed about the various rating of circuit breakers. Okay, it's a very important question. Various rating of circuit breakers. So in this, there are a few clarifications to be we have to discuss on that. That is basically on the making capacity of a circuit breaker and the short time making break capacity and the breaking capacity and short time capacities. Okay, this topic is important even for the main electrical subject also. And sometime this question was also once it was asked before also, what are the various rating of circuit breaker? Okay, I made this in a very short form, basically like rated voltage, basic factors. Okay, rated voltage, rated current, rated frequency, operating duties, breaking capacities, making capacities, short time capacities. So we'll see this each one of them before we go to the next topic. See if any, this is one breaker. Generally you'll find on the circuit breaker on the side all these parameters of circuit breakers. So you see here it's showing like rated voltage is 7.2 to 12 kV. So that means it is rated voltage is maximum 7200 volt to 12,000 volt, and rated current is 630, 1250, 2000 amps. Rated frequency, rated short circuit breaking current, rated short circuit making current. And making current and breaking current, you can see the difference. Breaking current is 25 kiloamps, whereas the making current is 65 kiloamps. So we will see why the making current is more than the breaking current. And short time withstand current, that is 25 kiloamps, and the rated control circuit. As I explained in the last class, that all the breakers, most of the breakers, the control supply is always 110 volt DC. And that is why you will find on board ship, there is a 110 volt battery charger for these breakers. The reason being is that suppose there is a blackout, and the power, you need the power for the breaker to come on, like for the charging circuit, that should be 110 volt. So that is always you'll find a battery backup for this control circuit voltage. Most of the ships you'll find this battery charger 110 volt inside the switchboard room. So this is a whole control supply for the breaker. That means breaker opening, closing, tripping, all is control supply is 110 volt. It never been 24 volt, or you will not find any AC, it is always a DC voltage. So rated voltage, first one is the rated voltage, and the rated voltage of a circuit breaker, it corresponds to the higher system voltage for which breaker is intended. So this is a phase-to-phase voltage. It is always in VRMS voltage, that is RMS voltage. It's a rated voltage. Means at what voltage is the breaker is working, that is a rated voltage. Then the rated current. Rated current means the rated normal current of a circuit breaker is the RMS value of the current, which the circuit breaker can carry continuously with the temperature rise and with the temperature rise of various parts within the specified limits. So it will be always like 400, 630, 800, it goes like this. So the contacts and other current carrying parts in the interrupter breaker are generally based on the limits of temperature rise. Okay, so this is the rated current. This is also you'll find on the breaker. This is the second one, voltage, rated voltage, rated current, rated frequency. See, generally what we have is 50 or 60 hertz. The frequency also got an effect on this because the frequency of a current influences the circuit breaker behavior as follows. Because the temperature rise of the current carrying parts and the neighboring metallic parts is influenced by the eddy current. Okay, so as you know, like eddy current means when a conductor is placed in any changing magnetic field, the induced current is, we call it as an eddy current. So the eddy current has to be reduced. That is why in the transformers and all, you'll find this cores are, the transformer cores are insulated, and that is to reduce the eddy current. So the temperature rise of the current carrying parts and the neighboring metallic parts is influenced by this eddy current. So when the frequency increases, the increase in frequency results in increased current. Hence, with specified limits of the temperature rise, rated current of the circuit breaker needs derating for application on higher frequencies. That means when the frequency rises, that means the frequency also got an effect on the eddy current, because eddy current means when a conductor is placed in a changing magnetic field, the induced current is induced. That we call as an eddy current. So one is the rated frequency. What frequency the breaker is operating? That's very important, whether it is 50 or 60 hertz. And second one is the operating cycles. You see that basically the maintenance of the breaker is carried out, how many times it is operated every time. Now that is what I was telling you, you have a counter on the front of the breaker. So when you carry out a maintenance on a breaker, so you can carry out a maintenance like annually, or you can carry out every 2000 operations. 2000 operations means 2000 opening like closing operations. This is recorded on the breaker by a counter. So whichever comes first, either one year annually or 2000 operations. And maintenance generally on these breakers, like high voltage breakers and all, we don't do the maintenance on board ship. But like ACBs and all, we can do it because it's the rating is a medium voltage breakers. One is the insulation resistance test and the overload tripping test. These are tests we can do it. For the high voltage, what maintenance you do on board ship on a breaker is one is if it is a vacuum circuit breaker, we do the vacuum check. That is one thing. We can inspect the breaker, and this other things like tripping and everything is done by the yard people. They come on board ship and they do all this tripping test, overload tripping test, because you have to inject the current, etc. So the frequency of the maintenance of the breaker is based on the either it is annually or it is number of the operations. So normally it is around 2000 operations. Now, what is a making current of a circuit breaker? So we have seen now what are the ratings. One is the rated voltage, rated current, rated frequency. These are the three things. And the next one is a making current, and the other one is the breaking current. Making current means the circuit breaker is used for switching on and off the circuit, and also for isolation of a faulty section in case of a fault. So that's the basic function of a circuit breaker. And the making and breaking of a circuit breaker, both of these terms are very important for the selection of circuit breaker. Making and breaking current capacity of a breaker has a prime importance when the circuit breaker opens at the time of a fault and when the circuit breaker closes at the time of a fault. So these two things are very important. That means the circuit breaker should open at the time of a fault. That we can call breaking. And when the circuit breaker should be able to close when there is a fault existing also, that is called making. So we'll see that is, so breaking capacity of a circuit breaker. The breaking current capacity of a circuit breaker is maximum fault current which can flow through the circuit breaker for a short period of time from the time of occurring a short circuit till clearing of the fault without any permanent damage. So that is what the breaking current. That means the breaker should be capable of withstanding the short circuit current for certain time. So the maximum fault current which can flow through the circuit breaker for a short period of time. So we can say maximum fault current because of anything, like it can be a short circuit or it can be anything. So the maximum fault current which can flow through the circuit breaker for a short period of time from the time of occurring the short circuit till clearing of the fault without any permanent damage. So the breaking current capacity, or we call it as a short circuit breaking current, is expressed in Ka, that is kiloamps. It is RMS current. So when you say a circuit breaker has got a 40 Ka short circuit interrupting capacity, that means it can break the 40 Ka current without getting damage. So that is the breaking current. So that is the maximum current which can flow when there is a short circuit. That is called the breaking current. You see, making current capacity of a circuit breaker. The making current capacity circuit breaker is a maximum peak value of the current that a circuit breaker can interrupt without any damage if the circuit breaker is closed at fault. Whenever any fault current flows, this fault current, you see, suppose there is a short circuit take place, you can see from this diagram, the current is peak at the start. That means this subtransient period, it is divided into 3 periods: subtransient, transient, and steady state. So why it is called steady state? Because the current is short circuit current is steady here. The fault current is steady here. Here the current is dropping. Here the current is very high in the starting time. The current is very high. The current is very high. So there are 3 periods of time after an occurrence of a fault. So one is a subtransient period, transient period, steady state period. So this is what a fault current is flowing. So initially the fault current is very high, then it becomes slowly dropping, then it becomes steady current. So AC current is very large during this subtransient period, and the DC current is about 62%. Now here there is also a DC factor in this, and it is decayed in 1 to 2 cycles. It is getting the DC current will start decaying it, then only it's an AC current. Then it becomes a steady state. So if you see this, the magnitude of the current during a subtransient period is maximum. As I told you, this is called the subtransient period. Here the current is very high. When there is a short circuit, the current is going to be high at the starting. So magnitude of the current during subtransient period is maximum. And if the circuit breaker is made on when the fault persists, must be capable to interrupt the fault current without getting damage. So initially the relationship of making and breaking current is that the peak value of the symmetrical breaking current is √2 into I. Because why we take this, now we have the RMS value of the current. So it is the peak value. So as we know, like the RMS value is equal to peak value multiplied by √2. That is, √2. So here if you take this √2 into current. So during subtransient period, there is a DC current also present for 1 or 2 cycles. So the magnitude of the DC current is approximately equal to the peak value of symmetrical basic current. So the peak value of the current during subtransient will be 2.55 into I. That means making current is equal to 2.55 into symmetrical breaking current. That is why if you see here, the making current is always more than the breaking current. If you see this breaker specifications, here you can see here, see 25 kiloamps is the breaking current, but making current is much higher, 65 amps. So that means making current means when you are closing a circuit breaker, when there is a fault exists, this current has to be much more, that is 2.55 into breaking this current. So here you can see here, the making current is more than the breaking current because of these reasons. Why? Because during making current should be higher because you are trying to close a breaker when there is a fault exist. So it should be able to withstand that much. This is the ratings of a breaker. See, it is not what we mean to say that why the making current is higher than the breaking current, because when you try to close a breaker during a fault conditions, it should be able to withstand much higher current than the normal rating. That is why this is 65 and this is 25. So making current is 2.55 into symmetrical breaking current. So we can say 2.55 into the breaking current. Okay, so this is a breaking capacity and making capacities. When you interrupt both of them, like breaking means it must be capable of opening the faulty circuit and breaking the fault current. Breaking capacity is the level of the current the circuit breaker can interrupt without damaging itself electrically or structurally. Now making means it must be capable of being closed onto a fault. It should be capable of being closed onto a fault. So making capacity is the level of the current at which breaker can be closed without any damage to itself. So making means you are closing the breaker. When there is a fault, that is called making. Making breaker, breaking breaker. Breaking means opening breaker, making means closing it. And short time capacity means it should be able to withstand the short circuit current for certain time. It must be capable of carrying the fault current for a short while another breaker is clearing the fault. Because when you see the selective coordinations, you have many breakers. That means breaker should not trip immediately. It should be able to withstand the short circuit current for some time. That is known as the short time capacity. So this is defined in times, like how many seconds it is, like that. So short circuit breaking current of a circuit breaker is defined as the maximum current can flow through this breaker from the time of occurring a short circuit to the time of clearing the short circuit without any permanent damage in the circuit breaker. Short time capacity. So these three things I will again explain. Breaking capacity means breaking, it should be capable of opening the faulty circuit and breaking the fault current. Okay, that is mean it should be able to withstand for certain time. Whenever the current exceeds certain value, it should break. Making means you should be able to close a circuit breaker even there is a fault. That current is known as the making capacity. Short time capacity means whenever there is a short circuit take place, it should be able to withstand for some time even there is a short circuit. That is called short time capacity. So the rated short circuit breaking current of a circuit breaker is the highest RMS value of the short circuit current which the circuit breaker is capable of breaking under specified conditions. Okay, this is the breaking current. And short circuit making current means it may happen that circuit breaker may close onto an existing fault. You have a fault and you close the breaker. That current capacity is known as the making current capacity. The circuit breaker should be able to close without hesitation as a contact touch. Circuit breaker should be able to withstand the high mechanical forces during such closure. So the rated short circuit making current is at least 2.5 times of the RMS value of the AC component. So rated making current is 1.8 into root 2 because we are converting this into the peak value multiplied by the short circuit breaking capacities. Okay. So this is what making current and short circuit current. And there is also called symmetrical and asymmetrical current. The short circuit faults may include both symmetrical and asymmetrical components. See, whenever a short circuit plays, there can be symmetrical. What is symmetrical and asymmetrical? If the short circuit does not include a DC component, it is called symmetrical short circuit current. If there is no DC component, we call symmetrical short circuit current. If the short circuit contains a DC component, we call asymmetrical component. So this short circuit current, we say symmetrical and asymmetrical. If there is a DC component present in that, we call it as if there is no DC component. If it is having no DC component, it is symmetrical. And if the short circuit contained a DC component, we call asymmetrical component. Okay, symmetrical current and asymmetrical current. It is whenever there is a fault current flows, there can be two currents in that. One is called symmetrical current and asymmetrical current. Symmetrical current means that does not have a DC component. You see, AC and DC current, what is the difference between AC and DC current? DC current is only in one direction. AC current means it's in both directions. Is it positive and negative? So any fault short circuit current, there can be a DC component also. If there is a DC component, we call asymmetrical current, and there is no DC component, we call symmetrical component. Now, symmetrical fault current, if in a circuit mainly containing reactance, a short circuit occurs at the peak of the voltage wave, the short circuit current would start at zero and trace a sine wave, which would be symmetrical about the zero axis. Asymmetrical means right after the fault occurs, when there is a short circuit, the current waveform is no longer a sine wave. Instead, it can be represented by a sum of the sine wave and decaying exponential. That means there is a DC component present in that. You can look at this current. What makes a fault current? You see, this is a proper sine wave. Now here you see here, you got a DC component also, this one. This is a DC component, and you have an AC component. This is the AC component. The black one is the AC component, and this is a DC component. So this is a fault current. Fault current is a combination of symmetrical and asymmetrical current. Symmetrical current is pure DC, no DC in that, and asymmetrical means there is a DC in that. So you can see here, asymmetrical breaking current is RMS value of the combined sum of the DC and AC components of a short circuit current. Asymmetrical means there is a DC component present in that. Symmetrical means there is no DC component, it's a pure AC wave. This is what a fault current looks like this. So it is a combination of asymmetrical and symmetrical current. Okay, so that so hopefully you are clear with this circuit breaking rating of the circuit breaker. So if they ask you the examination and all, you need to mention only these parts. Okay, I just went in other slides to explain to you what is making current, what is breaking current, why the making current is more than the breaking current. But this will this is the answer for this. Explain various rating of circuit breaker. You say rated voltage, rated current, rated frequency, operating duties, breaking capacities, making capacities, short time capacities. This answer is good enough for this question. You can give one example also like this. What are the things you will find on a breaker? This normally you'll find on not on the front side of the breaker. If you look at the side, you'll find this. There is a sticker or a tally like this, which mention voltage, current, frequency. The requirement is that when you change a breaker on board ship, because like VCB or SF6 breakers, you cannot do any maintenance. If you lose the vacuum or if you lose the SF6 gas, you need to replace the breaker. And normally they have spare breakers on board ship. Always you'll find one breaker at least, spare breakers. So you must see the rating of these things are very important. Rated voltage, current, frequency, breaking current, making current, withstand current. You see, it should be 3 seconds. That means it should be able to withstand for the short circuit current 25 kilo amps up to 3 seconds. It should not immediately trip. When there is a short circuit, it should not immediately trip. It should wait for 3 seconds to trip. And the rated controls voltage. So these are the things you will find on a breaker on ship. It may be on the side. It will not be on the front side, because on the front side you'll find all the various current settings and etc. This will be at this side. You'll find this tallies. Okay. So I hope you are clear with this ratings of the breaker. Still, if anybody has something, you can just send me. Okay, this is just for your knowledge. Somebody asked you like Viva and all, what is short circuit analysis? Okay, this is very important, especially short circuit analysis used to determine the magnitude of the short circuit the system is capable of producing and compares that magnitude with the interrupting rating of the overcurrent protective devices. See, on board ship, we have to calculate this short circuit always, because suppose there is a short circuit take place, whether your protective equipments are capable of withstanding or not. Okay, this is bit deeper in this, but I'll just give us brief introduction. What is short circuit analysis? Why we do this short circuit analysis is that to find out what should be the rating of your even a breaker. Suppose you want to put a breaker in some circuit, you should know what should be, in case of a short circuit, how much the current is going to flow. You cannot just change a breaker. Suppose generator one breaker is bad, you put some other breaker of different capacities, you can't do that. In that case, you need to do the short circuit calculations. This calculation is done during the yard, the commissioning time, this calculation is done. That means all the equipments on board ship, they do a short circuit analysis. Suppose there is a short circuit take place, and what will be the maximum short circuit current flows? Whether your breaker is able to withstand that much current. That is known as the short circuit analysis. There's a different set of calculations on this. I will not go in that, just to give you a brief idea what is short circuit analysis. This short circuit analysis is used to determine magnitude of the short circuit current. Simple answer. What is short circuit analysis? It is to find out what is the magnitude of the short circuit current is going to be flow. Second thing, why you do this short circuit analysis? So that you can rate your overcurrent devices. What type of circuit breaker you should have, what should be your current settings, etc. You are doing this. Okay. So there are different ways to calculate this. It's very long calculations. I will not go that. So just to understand why we do this short circuit analysis. It is to find out the magnitude of the short circuit current, and also to decide what should be the rating of the protective devices, or current protective devices, or breakers, you can say anything. So with this, we have finished with this previous class. I think that was the questions what you asked me in the last class. Second thing, you asked me about this poles. When we discussed the fuses and breakers, there was a different one answer was there. I remember because the fuses are single pole version or something. Okay, so basically what the poles means is the number. The poles means the breakers are generally, we call it's only one pole, because you can only connect one circuit. Okay, in case of circuit breaker, you can have various versions of the, you can have three circuits. If it's a 3-pole circuit breaker, means it basically there are three separately circuits which is simultaneously monitored by the breaker. Okay, that was the difference actually. So when you say 3-pole circuit breaker, means 3 poles are the number of completely separate circuit. You have 3 phase. It's separate 3 circuits which are simultaneously protected by the circuit breaker. So that we call as a 3-pole circuit breaker. Whereas fuse is what? Fuse is only in one circuit. That means that fuse blows means that circuit is only out. Suppose you got a 2-phase. Suppose you have a 2-phase like AC, single phase or 3-phase. 2-phase means only 2 fuses. So 1 fuse blows means 1 line is cut off. Okay, that is the difference between versions, single version and the multiple versions. Okay, so with this we have finished with this. If anything else is there, you can send it me through the mail. Any other clarifications what do you have on the breaker part? So let's recap of this, what has been covered in the last till now. That is basically from the generator and distribution of high voltage ships, electrical propulsion, synchro converters, functional and operational safety requirements, assigning the qualified personnel to carry out the maintenance, and high voltage breakers. Okay, this was what. Let's just glance through these questions and just revise it, a recap, so that you remember all this. First of all, we have seen why we use high voltage on board ship. That is basically because of the power requirements. We are using high voltage. You need more power, especially for the container ships and gas carrier ships, etc. Passenger ships, you need high voltage. Rig ships, supply ships, etc. You need higher power. So what are the advantages of using high voltage on board ship? One is, for a given power, higher voltage means lower current. That is the basic concept. That means for a given power, if you increase the voltage, the current reduces. That is the main advantage. So when the current is reduced, what happens? The copper losses are reduced, short circuit levels are reduced. Okay, so reduction in size of the generators, motors, cables, etc. Saving space and weight by the compact equipment, more easy installations, lower losses because it is I square R, current is reduced, so the losses are reduced, and a reduction in short circuit level. Very important factor is this. Why? Because when the current is reduced, your short circuit levels are reduced, the rating of the breakers are reduced. So you can reduce the rating of the breakers also. That is the main advantage of it. And what are the limitations? Higher insulation requirements, because higher voltage you need more insulations. That is the main thing. And second thing, risk factors are very higher because you need to have strict safety procedures. So this is very important. So these are the limitations and these are the advantages. So main advantages is given power, higher voltage means lower current. Okay, reduction in size, generators, motors, and cables, saving in space, ease of installation, lower losses because I square R, current is reduced, the losses are reduced, reduction in short circuit levels, the rating of the breakers are reduced. So application of electrical equipment used in power systems. Limitation is insulations. See, draw a neat sketch of an electrical HV propulsion switchboard. See, this diagram is a high voltage switchboard having a propulsion system, electrical propulsion systems. We have discussed last time various type of electrical propulsion systems. So we have normal conventional systems, we have electrical propulsion systems, we have azipod systems. I have shown you each diagrams how electrical propulsion looks like, how an azipod propulsion looks like. So nowadays most of the ships are the electrical propulsions. So whether it is most of the gas carriers, passenger ships, all they have the electrical propulsion systems. Even the regasification ships also, they are using the electrical propulsion system. And the passenger ships and some of the new latest LNGs, they are using the azipod propulsions. Okay, so here you can see it's a high voltage switchboard. This has been, as is a mandatory that this high voltage switchboard should have two sections. That is the requirements. So you can say this is, let's say, number one switchboard or number two switchboard or port side switchboard or starboard side switchboard. On board ship, you'll find two switchboards which are connected with a tie breaker. So tie breaker is basically to connect two sections of the switchboard. That is a function of a tie breaker. Tie breaker and this type of breakers, you see, this will be an SF6 breaker. Normally you'll find SF6 or VCB also can be, but it will be very high rated breaker. So normally SF6 is maximum high voltage, we are using SF6. So this is a tie breaker, and these breakers we can call it as a supply breakers. Supply breaker is a breaker which connects the generator to the switchboard, is called the supply breaker. Supply breakers are normally VCBs, vacuum circuit breakers. So here you can say this is a SF6. This all will be, this one can be SF6 or it can be VCB also. But here if you see here what it connect to low voltage, it can be ACB also, air circuit breakers. It's a medium or low voltage we are using air circuit breakers. So this is a propulsion switchboard. Why we call propulsion? Here you can see it's a propulsion system here. This is a propulsion motor, propeller, and here you have a converter. So this unit we can call it as a converter. So you have two propulsion system, converter, and this one is transformers. All you find here the round shape. This one is all transformers. So primary and two secondaries here, like primary and secondary. And in additional, they are shown some ballast pumps and Botester pumps. Ballast pumper number 1, 2, ballast pumper number 3, and the Botester. So this is also high voltage. So this is, we can say it's a filter breakers which is giving for the ballast pump. And in addition to this, you can see here one connection here which is coming here. This is also high voltage. So this is basically high voltage, and this is a low voltage. Because this is a step down transformer, it is 450 volts 60 hertz, and this is a 6600 volts cargo switchboard. So this is a high voltage. This is starboard side high voltage, starboard side low voltage. Okay, so here is generator is, you can see here it is 12,222 kVA. Generator ratings, generator, sometimes you will find most of the generator rated in kVA. Okay, it isn't, because power factories again depend upon the load. So this is a switchboard diagram for high voltage propulsion switchboard. Okay, propulsion switchboard. The same diagram can be used if for a generalized switchboard also. Only thing is that you can put an additional emergency switchboard in this. They are not shown the emergency switchboard. So emergency switchboard will be connected with a low voltage switchboard. It will be an emergency switchboard. What are the advantages of using electrical propulsions? So this is first is the space required for installation of electrical propulsion machinery is very less. You see conventional type and electrical type, you need very less space for the electrical propulsion system, and it provides improved maneuverabilities. So because in case of electrical propulsions like start, stop, reverse, everything is quick because it's only a motor. You can stop it, you can crash stop it, you can forward reverse can be done very quickly. So that is fast, improved maneuverabilities. Then environmental benefits because low fuel consumptions and emissions. This is another advantage. High performance tough ice conditions due to the maximum torque at zero speed. You see maximum torque you can get this. That is advantage of this. You get a very high torque. So this type of propulsion systems are used for icebreakers. Most of the icebreakers are using electrical propulsions. Also the new ships which has got this propulsion systems can break the ice without the icebreaker. So that is one other great advantage, because otherwise when you are sailing in these areas, the icebreaker has to go first, then the ship has to go. So in this case, you don't need an icebreaker, especially azipod propulsions. They don't need an icebreaker, so they can go direct without an icebreaker. That is another advantage. And reduce life cycles caused by less fuel consumptions. So that is less fuel consumptions. Noise pollutions. Noise is reduced. Also the vibration is also reduced in case of electrical propulsions. Vibration is very less. Efficiency of the electrical plant is less than the conventional system. Efficiency of the electrical plant is less than the conventional system. That's what says. They say like that. Efficiency is less than the electrical plant comparing with the conventional plants. Installation cost of the electrical plant is much higher. So you need to have a converter and etc. transformers, high voltage transformers. So the installation cost is going to be very high. Different and improved training for ship's crew, as a ship is completely different from mechanical system. You need to have a proper training on these converters, etc. Lot of automations, lot of automation networks, and high voltage transformers. So much of computerization because fully it is automation. It's a full automatic network. So you need a training for the people, especially on the high voltage, electrical propulsion systems. So these are the advantages of using electrical propulsion system. Explain the duties of authorized persons and the competent persons. You see, you should be able to identify what are the duties of an authorized person and competent person. So authorized person means the person who is authorizing it. Okay, he is authorizing, he checks everything, he authorizes to a competent person. Competent person is a person who is carrying out the job. So you must understand these two people. One is authorized person, one is competent person. What are the duties of an authorized person on board ship? If high voltage, particularly to the high voltage. First thing is that you should control the work on high voltage systems. All the works has to be totally controlled by the authorized person. He will inspect, maintenance schedules, safety programs, and also he has to monitor the work. Then he ensures that all the record concerning to HV systems are kept up to date. All the maintenance, what you carry out, all the fault systems, all the logs, everything has to be maintained. Record of high voltage switching operations, then ensures that test equipment is maintained in good conditions. See, generally for high voltage, what all the test equipments we have? First thing we have the Megger, that is a common thing. Then you have for the vacuum, if it is VCB, you have the vacuum tester, etc. You have a lot of PPs for high voltage. All has to be maintained in a good conditions. Then he will appoint the competent persons and maintain a register of all the appointments. So authorized person is the person who decides who should do the job. Okay. Then he ensures that necessary safety posters are displayed in substations all the time. So this is part of it. So that you need to have a safety posters to be placed in the stations. And he can, authorized person is the one who issue and cancel the safety documents. Routinely inspect and test substation to earthings, routinely inspect, test transformer switch gears. So safety documents means like permit. Finally, the permit is given by the authorized person to the competent person. He is the person to cancel the permit. Test permit for the work permit, test permit, all are issued and cancelled by the authorized person. He is the last. He issues the permit, he cancels the permit. So all has to be done by the authorized person. Very important question. What are the duties of authorized persons? Okay. Next is the competent person. Competent person means he is competent to do the job. He is technically qualified. He is aware of it. He knows how to check all this like any stuff like in inspections, etc. So he should comply with the safety guidance when carrying out the work. He has to follow the safety guidance of the high voltage. And there are a lot of other things we coming in the coming classes. You will see what are the safety norms which he has to follow. Competent person. That is a lot of other things. So competent person should use safe methods of work, safe means of access, and personal protective equipments and clothes provided for safety. So this he has to follow all this. Safe means of access work, methods of work, all the PPE has to be worn, and he should be concerned with the nature and extent of. He should be thorough, know that what he is going to do, because technically also you should be well aware of it, what he is going to do it. Second thing, be concerned with the nature and extent of the work to be done. Read the contents and confirm to a person issuing the safety document that they are fully understood. He should confirm to whom? The authorized person. That he is understood, that safety documents, everything is understood to him. He has to confirm to authorized person. During the course of work, adhere and instruct others under their charge to adhere any conditions, instructions, limitations specified by the safety document. It is done by the competent person if he has got somebody else with him. Keep the safety documents, keys in safe custody, and correctly implement any management procedure to achieve this. When in charge of work, provide immediate or personal supervision also is to be done by him. Wants all the persons as quickly as possible to withdraw from and not to work on the equipment concerned until further notice if during the course of work an hazard which could result in danger arises or suspected. So during work he found that something is wrong, then he should immediately stop the work, withdraw the work. That has to be done by him. Something like, see, you carry out an inspection. Hazard means any dangerous occurrence is called the hazards. Something you find that some hazard is going to happen means you should immediately stop the work. You should withdraw from the work. So these are the jobs of a competent person. Competent person means you should be thorough you should be very clear what is going to do it. And next to him is the authorized person. So you should report to him. That is a procedure. What are the HV switch gears, and explain in details any one of them. You should know vacuum circuit breaker, sulfur hexafluoride breaker, air circuit breaker. What is the basic working principle of all these three breakers? Very important. And it's only just few lines in this. There's no much need to go in deep of it. See, let's explain here a vacuum circuit breaker. Because why it is called vacuum circuit breaker? Because the arc is quenched. The arc quenching take place in vacuum. In case of vacuum circuit breaker. In case of SX6 breaker, the arc quenching means arc absorbing, take place in vacuum, in SF6, sulfur hexafluoride gas. In the case of ACB, it's open to air. So here, vacuum circuit breaker, the arc quenching take place in vacuum. The technology is suitable for medium voltage applications. So you see, it's only medium voltage application. Then which is high voltage is sulfur hexafluoride. Air circuit breaker is also low voltage. You see, 440 volt ships, you'll find all air circuit breakers. The material used for current carrying contacts plays an important role in performance of a vacuum circuit breaker. The contacts are very important. That is called curium is the ideal metal to make VCB contacts. VCB contacts, inside the VCB you have a moving and a fixed contact. Is it? So these contacts, they have put this curium is a material for making this contact, like silver contacts. So the operation of the opening and closing of his current carrying contacts and associated arc interruption take place in a vacuum chamber in the breaker, which is called the vacuum interrupter. So vacuum interrupter is a chamber inside the vacuum VCB where the moving and fixed contacts are there. So that chamber is known as the vacuum interrupter. This vacuum interrupter chamber is in vacuum. That pressure is 10 raised to minus 6 bar. So the vacuum interrupter consists of a steel arc chamber in center, symmetrically arranged ceramic insulators, and the pressure inside the vacuum interrupter is 10 raised to 6. So after many operations, the probability that the vacuum can go out, means it will lose the vacuum. Then you cannot use that breaker. You have to change this, you have to change the vacuum interrupter. You can change this vacuum interrupter, you can change it. It requires minimum maintenance compared to other circuit breakers. There is no much maintenance because contacts you cannot access, you cannot clean contact, you cannot do anything. So there is minimum maintenance in this. And service life of the breaker is much longer than the other circuit breakers. And there is no chance of fire hazard because it's vacuum and it is much environment friendly than the other breaker, SF6 circuit breaker. This is about the vacuum circuit breaker. So main point is this: vacuum circuit breaker where the arc absorbing or air quenching take place in vacuum, and the operation of the opening and closing of the circuit breaker contacts are associated. Arc interruption take place in vacuum chamber in the circuit breaker, which is called vacuum interrupter. So maybe they ask you what is vacuum interrupter. Vacuum interrupter, if they ask what is vacuum interrupter is a steel arc chamber and which is maintained at a pressure of 10 raised to minus 6 bar where the moving and fixed contacts are moving in case of a VCB. Explain in details. This is about, this we have covered. Then HV switching. HV switching means high voltage switching. Okay, the equipment that is considered by authorized person to be in dangerous condition should be isolated elsewhere and action taken to prevent it from being reconnected to the electrical supply. This is very important. While HV switching means when you're working on HV systems, what precautions has to be taken? One is the equipment should be isolated. Second thing, at working, all the working on and testing high voltage equipment connected should be authorized by a permit to work. So without a permit to work, you cannot work on the high voltage. Whether you want to work or whether you want to test, if you want to work, you should have a permit to work. If you want to test, you should have a sanction for testing it. No hand or tool has been designed must be in contact with the high voltage conductor unless the conductor has been confirmed dead by the authorized persons in the presence of competent person. When any work or test requires an accompanying safety person to be present, he should be appointed before the work begins. So high voltage, when you work, competent person is working, authorized person is a supervising person. It means he is a authorized person, he is authorizing to work. But competent person should have a safety, a standby person with him. So one person cannot alone work on high voltage. If it's only competent person, you should have a standby person with him. So this is mandatory that there should be a standby person when he's working on the high voltage. What are the 5 objectives of electrical safety program? So what are the main 5 objectives? To make personnel aware that all the rules, responsibilities and procedure for working safety in the electrical environment. What are the 5 objectives? To make people aware that there is a rule, there are some responsibilities, there are some procedures for working safely in electrical environment. So this is one objective. So people should aware that there are certain rules, responsibilities are there, rules are there, procedures are there for working on electrical environment. Second thing, to demonstrate employees' intention to fully comply with the federal law. To demonstrate employees' intention, that means the company has got certain policies, you must follow that, and which is should comply with the federal law. Second thing, the document general requirements and guidelines for providing workplace facilities free from unauthorized exposure to electrical hazards. To document general requirements and guidelines for providing workplace facilities free from unauthorized exposure to electrical hazards. So this is very important, that unauthorized exposure to electrical hazards is very important. Then document and general requirements and guidelines to direct activities of personnel who should deliberately or accidentally expose to electrical hazards. And to encourage and make it easier for each employee to be responsible of his own electrical safety discipline. So these are the 5 objectives of electrical safety program. 5 objectives are there. So one is you should follow the rules, responsibilities. There are some procedure while working on electrical environment. You should follow the company rules, which should comply with the federal law. And there are to document general requirements and guidelines so that you don't access unauthorizedly, you don't go and touch some high voltage stuffs or some electrical hazards should take place. Then explain in details the working of a VSI converter with pulse width modulation. You see, we have discussed cycloconverter, VSI converter, voltage source inverters, and then we have discussed a load commutator inverter. There are 3 types of converters in this. So this is a voltage source inverter. We call it, it's a basic principle of a variable frequency drive. It's a frequency drive. Now here, so this is a diagram you can see here. We have got 3 parts: converter, rectifier parts, a DC bus parts, and a inverter parts. So the rectifier is in a VFD is converting an incoming AC power into DC power, and the 6 pulse is used to describe 6 rectifiers here. Then the power flows through the rectifier. It is stored in a DC bus. So the DC bus basically it prepares an input for the inverter. So this stores, these are the capacitors. It's shown only one capacitor here. There are a lot of capacitors on this DC bus. So this AC which is converted into DC, this all capacitors will get charged. So as soon as this gets a signal and this will release, so the input is available to this inverter sections which converts DC into AC. So after the power flows through the rectifier, it is stored in DC bus, and DC bus contains capacitors to accept the power from the rectifier and store it, and later deliver that power through the inverter sections. You must mention this, what is the function of DC bus. It's not only filtering here. This capacitor will store the charge and prepare the input for this inverter side. The inverter contains transistors, so it can contain transistors means it can be generally it is used IGBTs, and that deliver the power to the motor. So IGBT can switch on and switch off at several thousand times per second and precisely control the power delivered to the motor. So IGBT uses a method called pulse width modulation, that is to stimulate a current sine wave at the desired frequency to the motor. So by having a pulse width modulations, it converts into a voltage, desired voltage and frequency here. So here we are using a V by F speed control. You must mention what is a function of pulse width modulation. This will complete here. So motor speed is dependent upon the frequency. Varying the frequency input of the VFD controls the motor output. Okay. So why we need a DC bus here? Because you see, why you cannot give direct here. So the whole purpose is that this DC, what is here, it is converted into variable voltage and variable frequency. That is done by this DC circuit. That is why we have a DC here. Variable voltage, variable frequency. So what is pulse width modulation? The process involved in inverting a DC voltage into variable voltage, variable frequency. That is known as the pulse width modulation. So what is the purpose of pulse width modulation? That will invert a DC voltage into variable voltage, variable frequency. That is the purpose of pulse width modulations. Pulse width modulation uses transistors which switch the DC voltage on and off in a defined sequence to produce the AC output voltage and frequency. So most of the VFDs nowadays using IGBTs. The goal of pulse width modulation is to create a sine wave output to produce a torque in the motor. The advantage of VSI converter is that you get a proper sine wave. You see, if you use an inverter, you will not get a proper sine wave. Sometimes you can get like load commutator inverter, it's not a proper sine wave. So that is why that effect will be there in the motor. In this case, you get a proper sine wave if you are using a VSI converter. So how the RMS voltage is varied, how the frequency is varied. RMS voltage means root mean square voltage. This is the RMS voltage. You see, this is the AC wave. So this is the RMS voltage of this AC wave. So by using this pulse width modulation, by varying the RMS voltage of the motor, by controlling the amount each pulse is on and off, we are controlling the RMS voltage. So by varying the width of the pulse, resulting in RMS voltage output. So here you can see this is the voltage here. This is less, here it is little more, here is maximum, peak voltage is maximum here. So the pulse width is also more here. So by varying the pulse width, we vary the RMS voltage. So how RMS voltage is varied? By varying the pulse width. How you vary the pulse width? Switching on and off. So if you delay the switching on and off, you get a higher, switching off you delay it, you get a higher on time. So more on time, higher pulse width. So how you vary the frequency in this case? So you are varying voltage and varying the frequency. The frequency means it's a rate of on-off switching of the individual IGBTs. How fast you switch on and switch off, you vary the frequency. So here you can see here different frequencies, 30 Hertz, 20 Hertz, 10 Hertz. Now we can make out from this that the time period, the frequency is varied here. You see, frequency is what? The total, one cycle means the time taken to reach one cycle is the time period. So this is supposed to be the time period here, one frequency. F is equal to 1 by T. Now here it is what? Here it is here. So it is more. In this case, one cycle is here. So the time period is much more. The time it takes more. So here say it is 10 kilohertz, 20 kilohertz, 30 kilohertz. So by the rate at which it is switching on and switching off, you can vary the frequency. That it shows. So IGBT switching frequency refers to the rate of the on-off switching of individual IGBTs. So you can vary the frequency. So by this, you are varying the voltage. By this way, varying the frequency. And this is done by the pulse width modulations. Pulse width modulation. Pulse varying. Pulse width is more varied. Okay. So this is about the VSI converter, which is basically a VFD. You are varying the frequency and voltage. So you can see AC input. You have the DC here, which is converted into AC. Okay, so this is the purpose we are using a DC here. Why we are using a DC? Because you have to make it a variable voltage, variable frequency. That is a function of using this DC here, DC bus. And why we need a DC bus? One thing is that it converts, filter this AC, the rectified DC, it's filtered also. At the same time, this prepares the input for these inverters. This capacitors is charged. It will prepare the input for these converters. And across this IGBT, you find the freewheeling diode. The freewheeling diode is only to protect these IGBTs. The freewheeling diode is not shown here, but there is a freewheeling diode. The whole purpose of the freewheeling diode is to protect these IGBTs. What happens, because sometimes the motor, when it crash stops, the energy which is flowing back, because the IGBT conducts only in one direction. So this energy has to be gone by, it has to go back. That is why a freewheeling diode is connected across these IGBTs, so that the IGBTs are protected here. Okay, that is why freewheeling diode is there. And this is called 6 pulse because we are using 6 diodes in this. Explain the different methods, different resistance testing methods on HV equipments. You see, we have got insulation resistance test. That is standard everywhere. We are using IR test. In addition, we have a polarization index test. And then we have a dark test, dielectric absorption test. Both insulation resistance test and polarization index test are conducted on HV machines to determine the service condition of insulations. So HV machines windings are affected by the moisture and contaminations. So IP test, that is polarization index test, is conducted specially to determine dryness and cleanness of the winding insulation. So main purpose of IP test is to find out dryness and cleanness. IR test is taken at different temperatures are doubtful during an annual refit or major repairs are undertaken. PA test is conducted. Normally we do an IR test. IR test means insulation resistance test. This we are doing with a Megger. So when you do this measure, what should be the minimum value? Now, when you are using a measure like any rotating machineries, okay, rotating machineries, when you are using it, minimum IR value should be rated value divided by 1000 plus 1. That is the standard rule. That means IR value minimum should be kV plus 1. Okay, that's why I said rated voltage by 400. So when you take IR minimum means kV plus 1 means, let's say if it is 440 volt, that means 440 divided by 1000 plus 1. So it becomes 1.44. Okay, IR value minimum is always kV plus 1, or you can say rated voltage divided by 1000 plus 1. That is the minimum IR value for any rotating machineries. But if you look at the cable, it is a different voltage. Like if you see a new cable which is using a test voltage about 1000 volt, minimum insulation should be 100 mega ohms. If you are using a higher voltage, test voltage, let's say 5000 test voltage or 10,000 voltage, so you are impressing higher voltage. In that case, it will go high. It can go up to 1000 mega ohms. If it is testing voltage is 10 kV. If it is 1 kV, it should be around 100 mega ohms. Okay, so normally IR test values are, we call 1 mega ohm is a minimum value for this. So in case if you take 6.6 means it will be 6600 divided by 1000 plus 1. So it will be how much? It will be 6.6 plus 1. Should be that way you have to calculate it. So this is the minimum IR test values. Okay, so one is insulation resistance test, which you do carry out with the measure. For high voltage, we are using 5000 volt measure if it is 6.6, and 1 minute we are applying the measure, and minimum insulation value should be rated voltage, or we can say kV plus 1. And if you think the insulation resistance values are doubtful and the generator is lying, let's say generator winding, it is lying idle for a long time, so then you go for a PA test. If you suspect that IR values are not correct, you go for it, because IR values again depends upon the different temperature, it varies. So then you go for a PA test, polarization index test. In that case, you apply for 10 minutes, take the reading. First 1 minute take the reading, 10 minutes take the reading, divide by 10 minutes by 1 minute, you get a polarization index ratio. That should be above 2.0 or more should be satisfactory. If it is less than 1.5, it is not satisfactory. Then, so these are the two tests: insulation resistance test, polarization index test. Then also a time resistant test, that is called dielectric absorption ratio test. That is 60 seconds by 30 seconds. It may be conducted for checking insulations for HV machineries. So these are the three tests: IR test, PI test, and DART test. DART means dielectric absorption test. Then explain arcing, arc flash, and arc blast. This we have discussed in the last class. Arcing means it's a production of unintentional electric arc during opening of a circuit breaker. Anything when you open like circuit breaker, or you open a switch or an isolator or a contactor, you get an arc. So when the arc flows, there will be indents of light is formed. You know, the indents light formed at the point of arc is called arc flash. So because of the arc flash, at the instant of heating a surrounding air, because of the arc flash, what happened there? The air surrounding area is heated up, and it can lead into a arc blast. So this is going like in events: arc, arc flash, arc blast. So arcing is the production of unintentional electric arc during opening of a circuit breaker or isolator or contactor. Arcing also occurs when heavy current flow down to the earth. An earth fault take place, also a short circuit take place, also there can be an arcing. And the indents of the light formed at the point of arc is called the arc flash. Suppose in case of a starter circuit, you find that there is a short circuit. When the short circuit take place, first is the arc is formed, that is the flow of current is formed. With that, there's an arc flash is formed. And the arc flash, what will happen? It will instantly heat the air surrounding the area or the conductors. It vaporizes and forming a high pressure wave. So if this pressure wave is not released, then it happen an arc blast. So it will blast. So that is called the arc blast. So these things are very important. What is arc? What is arc flash? Arc blast. It is a chain of action. Arcing take place, then because of the arcing you get an arc flash, and because of the arc flash that leads to an arc blast. It is a full explosion. Arc blast means it's an explosion. Arc flash means only you can see it. And arc means it is just only a flow of current between two conductors, like a moving conductor, fixed conductor. When it separates, yes, there's an arc can be formed. Or an isolator, when you close opening a breaker or an isolator, it can form an arc. This one is explain the following: circuit main earth isolation certificate, permit to work, sanction to test. See, circuit main earth means an earth connection is applied for the purpose of making apparatus safe to work on before a permit to work or a sanction test is issued, which is nominated on the document. Circuit main earth means whenever you want to work on any equipments, first part is that isolate the power, apply the earth, connect to the earth. The whole purpose of connecting with the earth is that any residual voltage in the circuit has to be drained to the earth, or you have to make it to the earth potential. So you have to make an earth connection. After making earth connection only you'll get a permit to work. So this is first part of it. An earth connection is applied for the purpose of making apparatus safe to work. That is called circuit main earth. Electrical isolation certificate. Electrical isolation certificate means it is issued by the authorized person after all the parts of electrical system has been isolated by means of safe isolation procedure. So this is the electrical isolation certificate. So once it is fully, the system has been isolated, it is issued by the authorized person, electrical isolation certificate. Permit to work, it is a form of declaration signed and given by the authorized person. So who issues the permit to work? Authorized person gives the permit to work to the competent person. And authorized persons to the competent person who is in charge of the work to be carried out in the close proximity of the high voltage apparatus, making known to him the extent of the work. What is the extent of the work? What apparatus is dead, is isolated from live conductors, has to be discharged in earth insofar electric hazards are concerned, on which it is safe to work. So permit to work issued by the authorized person to the competent person, ensuring that he can commence his work once a permit to work is issued. All the isolation has to be done before issue of the permit to work. And whatever the isolation has to be done, it has to be supervised by the competent person, then only he issues the permit to work to the competent person. See, when you do a test also, you need to have a permit on high voltage ships. So it is in additional to permit to work, you should have a sanction to test. So a form of a declaration signed and given by the authorized person. Here also authorized person is one giving a sanction to test to a competent person. So like any test you want to carry out, then also you need to have a sanction to test. What is neutral earthing, and explain the different type of neutral earthing. See, you have seen there are two types. One is neutral, insulated neutral and earth neutral. So high voltage ships we are using neutral earthing resistor, because to limit the earth current, the neutral earthing resistor is connected to the earth neutral to the source. So the resistor is of sufficient ohmic value to limit the earth current. So the resistor should limit the earth current. That is the purpose of the NER. And the magnitude of the earth current is sufficiently large to operate tripping mechanisms. Here you have it, there is not shown here. There's a transformer on this CT which will activate the earth leakage alarm also. Okay. Cycloconverter, this is another type of converter, is the cycloconverter. Here like fixed voltage, fixed frequency is converted into variable voltage, variable frequency. Fixed voltage, fixed frequency converted into variable voltage, variable frequency. Here you can see here the frequency is being varied here. Frequency is F here, it is reduced by 2, it is reduced by 4. So cycloconverter, the difference is that cycloconverters we are using semiconductor switches as thyristors we are using, and this is used especially on the passenger ships. It is reduced now, they are not using much cycloconverter now. Mostly it is VSI or load commutator inverter. So cycloc converter converts fixed voltage, fixed frequency to a variable voltage, variable frequency in a single step. The main difference is that in case we don't use a DC link in this, we have no DC link. It's AC to AC always. So how you vary this? By varying the firing angle of this thyristor, you vary the RMS voltage. You can vary the RMS voltage. Also, you can vary the frequency with this. When you fire the thyristor in a particular order, you can vary the frequency as well as the voltage both. So this is done by the power electronic switches. Thyristors are used in this. It is having a positive bridge and a negative bridge. So positive bridge, negative bridge. Last class I've shown you in positive and negative bridge. There are two bridges. So positive group and negative group. During positive half cycle, the positive bridge thyristors are fired. Negative half cycle, negative groups are fired. And then you can vary the frequency and voltage with this. So it's called cycloc converter. Cycloc converter means variable frequency, variable voltage. What are the preparations for working on electrical equipment? One is plan the job. That is the first part. Second, anticipate.
Sir.
Yes.
Sir, I have a question.
Yes. Go ahead.
So, sir, with the difference between the cycloconverter and pulse width modulation, is that only the IGBT and
you see in cycloconverter,
because it's thyristor, yeah?
Yes,
we use thyristor in cycloconverter.
We don't use DC, no rectifier. Okay. In cycloconverter, we don't use any rectifier in this. It's only AC is used. So this thyristors, there are two bridges, positive bridge and negative bridge. Here we don't use this pulse width modulations here. We are varying this by having the firing the thyristors in a particular order. And by varying the firing angle of the thyristors, we vary the RMS voltage. And by varying the by firing the thyristors in a particular order, we vary the frequency.
Okay, so the output is the same, variable frequency and variable voltage. Yes.
Yes, it is variable voltage, variable frequency. But this has got more limitation comparing with the other one, because you need to have many thyristors. You need to have a lot of thyristors in this. But VSI, we don't need it. That you can use IGBTs like switching pulse width modulation. Here we don't use pulse width modulation at all. You are only varying RMS voltage to vary the voltage, and you vary the frequency by firing the thyristors in a particular order. That is positive and negative bridge. Here you don't use.
Okay.
So now.
Okay, thank you. It's clear.
Yeah. So no DC link in this case. There is no DC link. It's only AC. So here you can see here, the cycloconverter converts fixed voltage, fixed frequency to a variable voltage, variable frequency in a single step without rectifying the voltage. This can be used for synchronous and asynchronous motors. And they have been separated by two halves, that positive bridge and negative bridge. Each half will be made to conduct by turning them during each half cycle of the AC, thus enabling a bidirectional power flow. So if you have still doubt, you can just send me. I'll send you this board, the hand notes on this. These three converters, I will send you the handouts.
Okay. It's clear, sir. It's clear. Thank you.
So what are the preparations for working on electrical equipment? You see, these are the 4-5 steps. The procedures, like plan the job, anticipate unexpected results, use procedure as tools, identify the hazards, assess the people abilities. Okay, so first thing is that you have to make a risk assessment. Risk assessment means this has to be done prior to starting of the job. The risk assessment means what all the hazards are there, what precautions you have taken, and what all the PPE to be used. The risk assessment has to come to a minimum level, then only you can proceed. If there is a risk assessment, after doing the risk assessment, still risk is there, then you cannot proceed with this job. So first you have to make a risk assessment, then you have to make a permit. First is basically planning the job, then anticipated any unexpected anticipated hazards can take place or not. What are the procedure? Use the procedure as tools, identify the hazards, assess people abilities. List the principle to ensure a safe work area, that is, use the right tool for the job. So properly for high voltage and all, you have the special tools, only you can use that tools. For testing, like you cannot use a multimeter for testing, you have a special probes and the proper PPs are there. All these things will coming in the next classes. I will explain to you what are the PPs, what are the test equipments, etc. So these are the principles to work on a safe work area. Use right tool for the job, isolating the equipments, protect the persons, minimum hazards. This earthing is, there are two type of earthing is called circuit earthing and bus bar earthing. So these are the two earthing principles we follow in high voltage. Circuit earthing means it is an inbuilt facility is there in the circuit breaker. Let's say one generator you want to isolate it, you rack out the breaker, there is a earthing switch. So that is called, you earth with that. But bus bar earthing means you need to put a additional portable ground cables with the bus bar. Suppose you are grounding, let's say one side of the bus bar, then after you isolate the bus bar for the tie breaker, you need to ground it with the bus bar, this grounding cables. So one that is a separate cables. These cables are provided for the high voltage. You will have a lot of high voltage earthing cables. You can both, and there are some connectors other which has to be connected. So earthing down required to ensure that any stored electrical energy in the capacitance of the equipment insulation after isolation is safely discharged. What is earthing down? You are discharging any residual energy in the equipment to the ground. Safely it is discharged to earth is called the earthing down. So what is earthing down procedure? Circuit earthing, bus bar earthing. An incoming or outgoing feeder cable is connected by a heavy earth connections from the earth to all the three conductors after the circuit breaker has been racked out. So you can only apply the earth when the circuit breaker is racked out, means it is taken out. This is done at the circuit breaker using a special key, and this key is locked in the key safe. The breaker cannot be racked in until the earth has been removed. So first you make the breaker on condition, breaker is fully open, then you use the handle, bring the breaker out, make the earthing switch, and when you make the earthing switch and there is a locking key, lock the key. So that is it. You cannot put the breaker back to the bus bar unless the key is being taken out, earth is being removed. So main thing is that you don't, first thing is that, because otherwise the bus bar will get earthed. So that is to avoid that. You cannot put the breaker back unless the earth has been removed. So this is circuit earthing. In the circuit itself, there is an earthing facility. Bus bar means when it is to work on selection of a bus bar, they must be completely isolated from all possible electrical sources. So this will include generator incomers, means incoming cable from the generator section, or bus tie breakers or transformers on the bus bar section. So these bus bars are connected together and earthed down using a portable leads. There is a portable earthing leads which gives visible confirmation of the earthing arrangement. So this is what is earthing down. What are the two type of earthing? Circuit earthing and bus bar earthing. This diagram, it says draw a neat sketch of high voltage generation and distribution switchboard. Here the emergency switchboard is not shown here. You can make one emergency switchboard from this 440. You can draw one more line here showing an emergency switchboard, and that has to be, this has to be connected together, because this 440, 450 or 450 has to be connected together with the breaker, and this has to, emergency switchboard has to be connected here. This one, what are the harmonics and how they are minimized? See, harmonics, the presence of harmonics in electrical systems mean that current and voltages are distorted and deviate from the sinusoidal waveform. See, a proper sine wave, you know, the sine, when you see a AC voltage, it has to be a proper sine wave. That get disturbed. The current and voltage will get disturbed. That is known as the harmonics. Okay, harmonics currents are caused by non-linear loads connected to the distribution system. A load is said to be non-linear when the current it draws does not have the same waveform as the supply voltage. So the flow of the harmonics current through the system impedances in turn creates voltage harmonics which distort the supply voltage. Now there are certain loads like a UPS, this variable frequency drives, they all can create harmonics. How they create harmonics? Because they are non-linear loads. What is called non-linear loads means when the current it draws does not have a same waveform as the supply voltage. So they are not linear. The current and voltage are not in the same phase. So it will try to draw some current and it becomes non-linear. The current and voltage will not be linear. It will not follow in the same shape. That is called non-linear loads. So if you have non-linear loads on board shape, what happens? It will create some harmonics. It will create some harmonics means it will create some disturbance to the current and voltage. It will affect other systems also. So this is very important because especially VFD drives generates too much of harmonics, which can affect other equipments, especially the equipments which are very sensitive, like navigational equipments, and it can affect that because the current and voltages are distorted and it will deviate from the sinusoidal waveform. So it will not be a sinusoidal waveform because these non-linear loads like UPS, or I'll take an example of a VFD drive, they will try to draw current they will try to draw a current and it will disrupt this sinusoidal waveform. That means voltage and current are distorted, which will cause harmonics to other equipments. So that is known as the harmonics. And how you minimize these harmonics? By adding more filters. Add filters to either like harmonics current of the systems, block the current from entering, or supply the harmonics current locally. Modify the frequency response of the systems by filters, inductors, and capacitors. So harmonics basically cost. What is harmonics? Harmonics means current and voltage are distorted and deviate from the sinusoidal waveform is known as the harmonics. Okay. What is harmonics? Current and voltage in electrical systems, current and voltage are distorted. It is disturbed and deviate from the sinusoidal waveform is known as the harmonics. What are the causes of harmonics? Because of the non-linear loads. What is non-linear load? A load which is drawing a current waveform, a current which will not have the same waveform as voltage. Current and voltage is distorted. That is called as a non-linear load. UPS is a non-linear load. VFDs are non-linear load. And some more examples like photocopying machines. They are non-linear load because the current what it draw, which may not be in the same as a proper sine wave. So this will affect the whole systems. So that is why you can see in some places where we have more non-linear load, it can affect your main systems also. It can create disturbances. So this is known as the harmonics. Okay. Harmonics means your AC voltage and current are not in proper sine wave. It will deviate from the sinusoidal form. It will not be sinusoidal. It will be like a zigzag like that. That is called the harmonics. You see, explain what do you understand by the selective coordination in isolating an electric fault. It's a very important question. What is selective coordination? Selective coordination means it's the application of a circuit protective device in series such that under overload or fault conditions, only the upstream devices nearest the fault will open. It is an application of circuit protective devices. See, what are the protective? Here you have the breakers here. All the breakers has got different capacities. See, here is feeder circuit breaker, 150 amps, 15 seconds is the time. Here is 60 amps, 10 seconds, 15 amps, 5 seconds, 5 amps, 2-3 seconds. That means suppose there is a fault to take place here. This breaker will open this first. So this will not affect the main systems because you don't want that some fault is taking place here, the main breaker trips. So that is called selective coordinations. So it is an application of circuit protective devices in series such that under overload or fault conditions, only the upstream device nearest the fault will open. Suppose the fault is here, only this will open. Selectivity is achieved by overcurrent and earth fault protective device if a fault condition occurring at any point in the installation. It is cleared by the protective device located immediately upstream of the fault. That means if there is a fault take place, this will open this and it will not disturb any of other things, because each breaker has been, see, it is 5 amps, 15 amps. So there is a short circuit, means as soon as the current exceeds 5 amps, this will trip. This has got still 15 amps, it will not trip. This is 60 amps, it will not trip. 150 amps, it will not trip. So if you look at this diagram here, now this is lacking coordinations. There is a fault here, this breaker tripped, this tripped, this tripped, this tripped. The whole line is tripped. So it is lacking breaker coordinations. But here you can see with a breaker coordination, selective coordination is there. You have a fault here, only this breaker is tripped. These are remaining intact. So in this you can see, for a selectively coordinated system, when an overcurrent event occurs, suppose there is an overcurrent take place at the branch breaker, let's say CB1 here, and the event is within the operating characteristic of the breaker, then the branch breaker should interrupt the circuit and main breaker should be remain closed and energized. So this is known as the selective coordination in isolating electrical fault. So all the breakers are different rated, and it is in such a way that if any fault take place, the one nearest the breaker will only trip, others will be remain intact. This arc and arc flash, arc boundary and hazard risk categories. Here you see here in this, there is a certain boundaries have been specified. One is called flash protection boundary, limited approach boundary, restricted approach, prohibited approach. Now what is flash protection boundary? The flash boundary is the farthest established boundary from the energy source, the farthest one. That means if you look at this diagram here, this one is the flash protection boundary. This is the equipment here. This is much far away from here. That is known as the flash protection boundary. The next one is called the limited approach boundary. That is next boundary. And third one is the restricted approach. It is restricted here. And fourth one is prohibited approach. You cannot reach here. So there are 4 boundaries: prohibited approach boundary, restricted approach boundary, flash protection boundary, limited approach boundary. So flash protection boundary is the farthest one. That is the one which is quite far away from this. So if an arc flash occurred, this boundary is where an employee would be exposed to a curable second-degree burn. The issue here is that heat generated from the flash results in burns. So what is the distance for this? So that we will see here in this. Next is coming the limited approach boundary. An approach limit at a distance from an exposed live parts where a shock hazard exists. If you look at this voltage here, 751 to 15 kV, that means 6,600, let's say. Exposed mobile conductor will be 10 feet 0 inches. Exposed fixed conductor will be 5 feet. Restricted approach boundary, it will be 2 feet. Prohibited is 0 feet 7 inches. So the distance has been specified, how far you can go near to the equipment, live equipment. So restricted approach, then prohibited approach means a distance from an exposed part which is considered as same as a making contact with the live part. So prohibited means you actually are going, is a live equipment, you are going to touch this. The distance from exposed part which is considered as same as making the live part. So this approach boundary distance are very important. Limited approach, how much you can go. Restricted approach, how much you can go. Prohibited approach, how much you can go. You see the different, when the voltage level is varying, the distance also varies here. Here is showing same, limited approach here, but here is reduced, it is 6 feet here, but here is 2 feet. And here is 0 feet 10 inches. So arc flash boundary is the distance at which an electrical arc can flash outward, which may endanger employees working on the electrical equipment. arc flash boundary. Flash protection boundary, the calculated safe working distance from the electrical equipment which would not expose the employee to the hazards associated with the electrical arc. That is called the flash protection boundary. So this the National Fire Protection Association has developed specific approach boundaries. So how far you can go, this is the distance, how far you can go in each one of these. You can see here limited approach here and prohibited approach is here. Prohibited approach, restricted one is here. What are the hazards of arc flash? See, in case of an arc flash, what happens? Whenever there is an arc flash, you know, because of the arc, you will have an arc flash. Because of the arc flash, you will have an arc blast. An arc flash means when you open a, suppose there's a breaker, you short circuit two phases, you get an arc flash. It will not be arc blast, it will be arc flash. But you can get a burn because of that. So arc flash can cause minor injuries, third-degree burns, potential death also, as well as other injuries including blindness, hearing loss, nerve damage, cardiac arrest. Fatal burns can occur when the victim is several feet from the arc. Serious burns are common at a distance of 10 feet. So what are the hazards of arc flash? I told you the arc flash means it's a short circuit. Suppose by mistake you open a starter panel and your two phases are getting shorted. So that is an arc flash. Okay, so with this, revision is finished. We'll go to this cable part. So high voltage cables on ships, the high voltage cables are different colors. Okay, generally you'll find that this color is used on board ship. So ship wiring cables had to withstand a wide variety of environmental conditions. Extreme of the ambient temperature, humidity, salinity, improved materials have led to ship wiring cables of fairly standards, design and safe, durable and efficient under all the conditions. So the normal distribution voltage on ship is 440 volt and cables for use in this voltage are designated as 600 to 1000 volt. If you see any cable of 440 volt motor, you'll find like this, it is 600 oblique 1000 volt. 600 volt to earth, that means it is 600 volt to earth. It should be able to withstand 600 volt to earth, and between two conductors it should be 1000 volt. That it means. If you see the cable on this, it will be there on this 600 oblique 1000. 600 is with earth, 1000 is between conductor to conductor. Higher voltage system require cables with appropriate ratings for 3.3 kVA phase earth neutral systems. The requirement cable is 1900 oblique 1300. And three-phase insulated systems, it will be 3300 to 3300. So one is with the earth, another is between the conductors. This the cables we have seen in the first class, what are the basic parts of a cable. So these are the conductor part and cable insulations, cable sheath. This is the galvanized armor part and outer plastic sheath. Conductor, this one is a conductor inside, insulation. 2 and 4 are the semiconductor layers, outside conductor and outer core. So what are the effect of fire on cables? You see, all the organic material will eventually burn in severe fire. Cable sheath materials are commonly in use are organic plastic compound that is classified as a flame retardant but will not sustain a fire. So most cable materials now achieve this property by developing a chlorine gas and acid foams to smother the flame. Okay, so basically what are the effects? Suppose there is a fire, what are the effects on the cables? So one is that it will burn in, all organic material normally burns in case of a fire. So most cables, by developing a chlorine gas and acid fumes to smother the flame. And the PVCs, because we are not used the PVCs. So new materials do not produce acid fumes and burning. So what are the one? That is PCP, and if you see XLP, they are used on board ship. I'll show you the another one slide I think I have. Here are a few questions in this. Discuss the various hazards and problems which are associated with electrical cable insulation in the event of fire. In the event of fire, what are the various hazards and problems? Insulation of the electrical cable is generally made up of rubber. Insulation of the electrical cable is generally made up of rubber or plastic. Amount of smoke generated by the plastic in case of a fire is dependent upon the factors like nature of the plastic, type of the additive used, flame, fire and ventilation arrangements. So most plastics produce very dense smoke and when heated. What are the suggest the remedies for this problem? That is, way to reduce these hazards are the following steps should be taken to prevent these measures. One is cable having EPR, that is ethylene propylene rubber insulation with the necessary sheathing of propylene or chlorosulfate chlorine, PCP or PCSP may be used. And GE armor will be used to protect insulation from fire and needs to be earthed. So these are the discuss various hazards and problems which are associated with electrical cable insulation in the event of fire. What are the remedies for these problems? Or what are the ways you can reduce these hazards? So the following steps should be taken to preventive measures like cable having EPR, insulation with the necessary sheathing may be used to protect insulation against fire. What are the important precautions for installing electrical cables? Cable and wiring external to the equipment must have a flame retardant properties. That is important. It should have a flame retardant properties. It should be installed in such a manner that it should not interfere with the original flame retarding properties. Cables and wiring for emergency equipments, lighting, communication, signal should be kept away from the spaces like galley, laundry, machinery, space of category A and high-risk places. Special precautions are taken for the cable installation in hazardous areas. It must lead to explosion in case of electrical fault. Terminations and joints are to be made in such a manner that it should remain retained from the original fire resisting properties. Avoid cable for damage, chafing during installation. Fireproof glands to be used. So these are the precautions for installing electrical cables. First thing is that they should have a flame retardant properties. The cable should have a flame retardant properties and it should not interfere with the original flame retarding properties. The cable what you are using should be PCP or XLP. They are the flame retardant type cables. And wiring for emergency equipments, lighting, communication, etc. has to be kept away from the spaces like galley, laundries or other high risk areas. Then special precautions are to be taken for cable installation in hazardous areas. That's a special cable is used in hazardous areas. And termination joint has to be, it should not be like in such a manner that it should retain the original fire resisting properties if you make any terminations or joints on the cables. Avoid cable for damage and chafing during installation. This is another care which has to be taken. Then fireproof glands are to be used, especially like starters or lightings and all. You should use the fireproof glands. Then with respect to marine grade cables, explain the different temperature and insulation classes. So there are A, B, C, A, B, E, F, G, H. They have got different temperatures. So what are the materials they have used? Like class A insulation, maximum is 105 degrees centigrade. They are basically cotton, silk and paper. Class B, 130 degrees. They are combination of the mica, glass and fiber. Class E is combination of the materials, but it can up to 120 degrees centigrade. F insulation means like mica, glass, fiber, but 155 degrees centigrade. H is 180 degrees centigrade, silicon, and so it is higher temperature cables. For especially for galley and all, we use this type of silicon cables, 180 degrees centigrade. With respect to marine grade cables, explain commonly used insulating materials. That is EPR, ethylene propylene rubber, silicon rubber, cross-linked polythene, halogen-free silicon rubber, butyl rubber. Yeah, these all questions are very important questions because these were questions were asked questions. So I put this, especially this, with respect to marine grade cables, maybe 4 mark questions or 3 mark. So what are the commonly used insulating materials? With respect to marine grade cables, explain sheathing of electric. What is sheathing? Sheathing means it is the one which is protecting the insulation from damage, but it is not classified as an insulating material. So they are required to be heat, oil, chemical resistant, and fire retardant. So what material is used? PCP is used. PCP is a common sheathing material, polychloroprene. Polychloroprene, PCP or neoprene. Neoprene. So two commonly used polymer cable insulation materials are XLP, that is cross-linked polythene, and EPR, ethylene propylene rubber. These are the most commonly used insulation materials. Okay. What are the precautions of installing a high voltage cables? You see, first thing is that high voltage cables has to be segregated from all other things. It has to go in a separate way, separate cable box. High voltage cables has to be segregated from cables operating at different voltage rating each other. They are not to be run in the same cable bunch, nor in the same ducts or pipes or same box. That is why you find the high voltage cables totally separate from all other cables. When high voltage cables of different voltage ratings are installed on the same cable tray means where the cable is passing, in the tray is called cable tray, there should be an air clearance between the cables. So suppose if you are passing a high voltage cable and you have a low voltage cable, there has to be some air clearance has to be there. So this air clearance is this. You see here the segregation of the cables. Minimum distance, if it is 6.6 volt, it should maintain 90 mm minimum air clearance. So segregation of high voltage cables are to be segregated from cable operating at different voltage ratings each other. In particular, they are not run in the same cable bunch, means high voltage and low voltage cannot be bunched together. High voltage has to be separate, nor in the same duct or pipes on the same box. Normally high voltage is always separate. It has to be separate high voltage, but where high voltage cables of different voltage ratings are installed on the same tray, air clearance between the cable is not less than the minimum air clearance for the high voltage in 2.3, that is this one. So it says like this much distance is to be maintained. That is, if it is 6,600, it should be 90 mm clearance should be there with the other voltage cables. Okay, so this is about the segregation of high voltage cable. Then the testing of high voltage cable. Testing of high voltage cable means the cable has to be tested. If you are using a 1 kilo, like if you are using 1000 volt megger, minimum insulation should be 100 mega ohms. This I am talking about cable testing. Okay, if you are using like 10,000 volt megger, it should be 1000 mega ohms when you are testing the cable. So before a high voltage cable installation, in addition to the existing installation, it is put in service, a voltage withstand test is to be satisfactorily carried out. This is all done during the yard initial time. Only we are doing it. They are testing the high voltage cable with a megger. So what they do is for cable rated voltage up to 1.8 to 3 kV, a DC voltage equal to 4 times of this will be applied for 15 minutes. After completion of the test, conductors has to be connected to earth for sufficient period to remove any trapped electrical charges. That means once you test these cables, let's say for 3.6 volt using a DC, a megger of 4 times higher than this 3.6. So once you test it, you should discharge it for 15 minutes so that any residual charge because of testing has to be discharged. So as I told you, like if it is a new cable and when you are applying a 1000 volt megger, minimum insulation has to be 100 mega ohms. If it is a new cable with a 10,000 volt megger, then it should be 1000 mega ohms. So this is for the cables. But any rotating machineries, minimum IR value is rated voltage divided by 1000 plus 1, or you can say kV plus 1. kV means if you are kilovolt plus 1, whatever the value you get plus 1 is the minimum voltage for rotating machineries. This is for cable, is minimum should be 100 mega ohms. If it is 1000 volt megger, if it is 10,000 volt megger, it has to be 1000 mega ohms. Okay, so this is about this. There's nothing much in these cables. The cables only these few questions in this is very important questions. So discuss the various hazards and problems which are associated with electrical cable insulation in the event of fire. Suggest the remedies for these problems. How the spread of a fire may be reduced by the method used for installing electrical cables. And another one is this one. With respect to marine grade cables, explain different temperature and insulation classes. Then, with respect to marine grade cables, explain commonly used insulating materials. And with respect to marine grade cables, explain what is sheathing of electrical cables. Okay, so these are questions, previously asked questions. That's why I put here. You have all these tutorials, you have all these question answers. You can go through that. I covered up in that. Okay, gentlemen, I think it's time up. So we stop with these cables, high voltage cables today. Okay. So if you have any other clarification, you can send it to me the email. So you can send it me the email and this if any other clarification you need. Okay. So go through these handouts, whatever the doubts, anything you have, we have enough time. We can discuss it in the revision classes. Any other topics to be discussed. So we have covered up till, if your handouts, if you see, we have covered up till high voltage cables. So next will be high voltage fuses and remedial actions. Also, we have to do one switching isolation procedure. In high voltage, how you do one switching isolation, full procedure has to be done. This is especially for the main switchboard, one transformer switching procedure has to be done in the, we'll do in the next class. Okay, thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, sir.